I never thought cleaning out my old childhood bedroom would lead to something that would change my whole life. My name is Rachel. Until that moment, I believed I fully understood my place in the family. I was the reliable, responsible one. I thought my job was to quietly support my stepsister Helen while she chased her dreams. Rachel, don't forget to check the back of the closet. My stepmother called from downstairs, her voice carrying that usual mix of kindness and control. If you find anything from school, we might be able to donate it. I sighed and pushed another box toward the door. I hadn't needed cleaning reminders in years, but that's just how my stepmother was, always giving instructions and staying in charge. Even now, as I helped them get ready to move into a smaller house, she hadn't changed. As I sorted through the nearly empty closet, my fingers brushed against something hidden behind the baseboard. It was a yellowed envelope, old and worn. I knew right away what it was. My name was written on it in my father's handwriting, elegant and familiar. I carefully opened the letter, trying not to rip the fragile paper. My hands shook. As soon as I saw the date at the top, my heart started pounding. The letter had been written just weeks before my father died. To my beloved daughter Rachel, it began. If you are reading this, it means my wish was not carried out. I asked your stepmother to give you the college fund I saved for you, $100,000. That money is for you alone, to help you follow your dreams. It hurt me to see your stepmother always putting Helen first and pushing you into the background. I hope this money helps you shine again. Tears filled my eyes as I read the rest. A college funds? My stepmother had always told me we didn't have enough money to send both of us to college. She said I needed to work so Helen could go instead. I believed her. I accepted that role in the family. It felt normal back then. But now, I realized there had been a secret hidden in that role all along. I didn't know my dad and stepmother had gotten married 6 years ago until he told me. My dad had raised me alone, so when he said he wanted to marry again, I was truly happy. I was excited to have a new mom and a stepsister. But that feeling didn't last long. My stepmother only cared about Helen, her own daughter. The reason was clear. I wasn't her real child. My dad saw this too, and they argued about it often. After those fights, he would say sorry to me and take me out to places I liked. It felt like he was even thinking about getting a divorce. But then, a year ago, he died in an accident. My real mom had already passed away, so after he was gone, I had no one. That's when everything really fell apart for me. Anyway, back to the story. As I stood there in shock after reading the letter, I heard my stepmother calling my name. Her voice was closer this time. She was probably wondering what was taking me so long. I quickly folded the letter and stuffed it into my pocket. My heart was racing as I heard her footsteps getting closer. For the past year, my stepmother had kept this letter hidden. While Helen went off to her dream college, I worked at a diner and cleaned houses to help cover bills. Even when she saw this, my stepmother never said a word about the money. "Yes, I'm here," I called out, somehow sounding calmer than I felt. When she came into the room, I pretended I had just found some old papers. But I kept one hand in my pocket, holding on to the letter. My dad had tried to give me a future. My stepmother had taken it from me. The girl standing in front of her now wasn't the quiet, obedient daughter she once knew. Now I knew the truth. I was changing. I wanted answers. Maybe even justice. I looked around my childhood bedroom one last time. Nothing would be the same again. The truth had been hidden here the whole time. And now I had found it. There was no going back. That night at dinner, I waited for the right moment. My palms were sweaty as I placed the letter on the kitchen table. As usual, my stepmother was setting the table just right, fixing the placemats. Helen was probably texting her college friends. "While I was cleaning today, I found something interesting," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "A letter from my dad." My stepmother froze. She didn't turn around, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. "It's just a letter," she said. I said, "It's just a letter." I repeated, "But it talks about a college fund." I pushed the letter forward. "He left $100,000 for me." Helen looked up, surprised. Her fingers stopped moving on her phone. "Oh, dear Rachel, my stepmother began, her voice calm but a little fake. Your father was confused before he passed. He made a lot of promises. Maybe he forgot when he wrote that letter. But the letter was written just 3 weeks before he died. I replied, not backing down. It clearly says the money was already saved. Do you really believe that? Helen asked, her voice cold as she stared at me. Do you honestly think Dad left you a secret fortune? What's next, a yacht? My stepmother cleared her throat. Your father and I did our best for this family. You know how expensive college is. Helen had so much potential. We had to support her future. That's when I couldn't stay quiet any longer. I stood up suddenly, and the sound of my chair scraping against the floor echoed through the room. What about my potential? I said, my voice shaking. I've been working nonstop at the diner and cleaning houses. I've been giving half my paycheck to this family, while Helen gets to chase her dreams. Stop being so dramatic, my stepmother shouted, finally raising her voice. We've all made sacrifices. Helen needed things that were important. Well, I didn't get anything, I shot back. Helen gave a fake, sarcastic smile. But even she looked a little uneasy. It's not my fault you couldn't do well in school, she said. Someone in this family had to succeed. Her cruel words hit me hard. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I looked at my stepmother, hoping, just for a second, that she'd speak up for me, that she'd say something fair. But she stayed calm, pretending nothing had happened. In that silence, a phrase my dad used to say came back to me. Focus on the present. What's done is done. I quietly picked up the letter. My dad's words stayed with me. They had taken away my future. And now they were trying to pretend it never existed. I saw it clearly now. Helen was still the golden child, and her mom was still cheering her on like always. Something inside me changed. It became firm and clear. I wasn't going to let this go. You're right, Dad, I said softly. What's done is done. But what happens next is up to me. Driving to Aunt Megan's house after that felt like escaping from a bad dream. I couldn't stand one more second of my stepmother's cold silence or Helen's smug face. When I got to Aunt Megan's cottage, the garden was full of weeds, and the wind chime moved gently in the breeze. This place had always felt safe to me. As I opened the front door, the warm smell of cookies baking filled the air. You found the letter, didn't you? Megan said, looking at me while wiping her hands on her apron, which was covered in flour. Her voice was calm, but certain. I couldn't speak. I just nodded. My throat felt tight. Come, sit down, my dear. There's more you need to know, she said, pulling out a chair for me. She left the room for a moment and came back holding an old envelope. She placed it gently on the table. Your father left behind more than just the college fund. There are bank records, letters to lawyers, even recordings of talks he had with your stepmother. It's all here. I opened the envelope and looked through the papers. My hand started to shake. The bank statement showed that my father had been saving money for years, much more than the $100,000 I had been told about. That's when I realized just how carefully my father had planned everything, and just how much my stepmother had hidden from me. The documents showed that 4 months after my father died, all the money had been moved to a new account. It was used to pay for Helen's college. He knew she might try something like this, Megan said, her voice rising. That's why he made me promise to keep copies of everything. I felt overwhelmed, angry, confused, and hurt. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I asked. Megan sighed. Your father told me to wait until you found the letter yourself. He believed you needed to be ready, strong enough to stand up for yourself. Just then, I heard the sound of a car door closing outside. Through the open window, we heard my stepmother's voice. She was talking to a neighbor. I need to speak with Rachel, she said. Megan squeezed my hand. If you're not ready, you don't have to face her, she said softly. But I was already gathering the documents, putting them in order. My heart was pounding, but I felt strangely calm. It felt like everything was happening at the right time. I heard my stepmother's footsteps coming up the front steps, followed by Helen's loud, dramatic sigh. Rachel, my stepmother called as she walked into the room. But when she saw the documents spread out on the table, she stopped suddenly. Her face went pale. "Is this what you were looking for?" I asked, holding up a bank statement. It clearly showed the exact amounts taken out to pay for Helen's college. "This was my college fund," I said firmly. "You had no right to use it." Helen opened her mouth to say something, but Megan cut her off. "It was her money." "You stole it," Megan said sharply. My stepmother wouldn't look at me. She turned her eyes away and mumbled, "I was planning to pay it back with my paycheck." "After you finished paying for Helen's master's degree?" I said, standing up. A wave of anger rushed over me, stronger than I had felt in years. The silence that followed said everything. I could see it clearly now. The lies she had built over time were starting to fall apart. And then it hit me. My father hadn't just left me money. He had left me the truth. And with that truth, he had given me the power to free myself. Later that evening, I was back at the diner for my shift. The bright lights made everything feel cold and dull. I poured coffee into mugs like a robot, feeling strangely disconnected from everything. "Rachel, are you okay? You look like you're about to fall over," a coworker asked while putting together an order. "I'm fine," I said, but my eyes were fixed on a figure outside the diner's front door. The bell above the door jingled, and Helen walked in. She wore a fancy designer coat, the one my stepmother had proudly given her for Christmas. The sight of her made my stomach twist. Helen sat down at the counter and looked right at me. "I need to talk to you," she said, her voice sounding annoyed. "You've really upset Mom." I stayed quiet, still wiping down the counter, not looking at her. "I'm working," I said flatly. Even so, Helen kept going in a quieter voice. "Mom's not working, and the mortgage on the house is overdue. Is this what you wanted?" At those words, I finally looked at her. "What are you talking about?" I asked, my voice steady. "Mom took out a second mortgage to pay for my last semester," Helen said. "She was counting on the money from your rent to cover it." For a moment, my mind went completely blank. The coffee pot slipped from my hand and crashed to the floor. Hot coffee spilled onto my ankles, but I barely felt it. All those shifts, all those extra hours, all the money I had worked so hard to earn, it had been used for Helen's education again. Not just once, but twice. "Rachel, take 5, Sophia, my coworker," said softly as she came over with a mop to clean up the spilled coffee. I nodded and walked to the break room. Leaning against the wall, I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. My hands were shaking. There it was, the record of all the money I had sent to my parents' account over the past 6 years. That money was meant for my future, for college. But it had been used for Helen instead. The door creaked open behind me. I turned to see Helen standing there. She didn't look sorry. Instead, she looked annoyed. "I get that you're upset about Dad's money," she said, "but just stop." I turned to face her and whispered with all the strength I had, "Stop." Helen sighed and looked me straight in the eye. "Mom did it for me, because I have potential. You didn't." That's when the quiet anger I had held in for so long finally exploded. "Is that so?" I said. "Or did you decide that before even giving me a chance?" Her face froze for a second. "That's unfair," I added softly. "Stealing my future is beyond unfair." I untied my apron and walked out to tell Sophia I was taking the rest of my shift off. "Rachel, wait." Helen called out behind me. But I didn't stop. My mind was racing. I started thinking about the small amount of money I had saved in a separate account. Money they didn't know about. It wasn't much, but it might be enough to cover a year's rent. Maybe even a down payment on a small apartment. I trusted Aunt Megan would help me figure out the rest. Just then, my phone buzzed. A message from my stepmother. "Family dinner tonight. We need to discuss your attitude." I stared at the message. Then, I typed a simple reply. "There's nothing to discuss. I'm moving out. I've spoken to a lawyer. You'll be held responsible for using my inheritance." Then, I blocked both of their numbers. I got in my car and started driving to Aunt Megan's house. For the first time, the heavy weight of lies and control I had carried for years began to lift. In its place, something new was rising. Something painful, but full of hope. That's when I realized revenge isn't about hurting others. It's about freeing yourself. Later that night, I sat on the bed in Aunt Megan's guest room, scrolling through apartment listings. My eyes filled with tears. This was it. The first step toward a new life. I looked around at the boxes I had packed in a rush. I was finally moving forward. I had already finished the process of renting a small studio apartment downtown. It wasn't big, but it was affordable on my diner wages, and that was enough. It was the start of my freedom. Just as I was about to press the call button to confirm my move-in date, the silence was broken by a loud, urgent knock on the door. "Rachel, I know you're in there," my stepmother shouted. Her voice was sharp and desperate. Aunt Megan appeared at the front door, her face serious. "You don't have to talk to her," she said firmly. But I had already decided. After 7 days of ignoring their calls and messages, I knew I couldn't avoid this any longer. It was time to end it. When Aunt Megan opened the door, my stepmother rushed in, clearly angry. Helen stayed in the doorway, unsure if she should come in or just watch, like it was some kind of drama on stage. But I knew this was the final act. My stepmother held up a stack of papers, her voice rising. "I've added up everything we've spent on you since you turned 19, rent, bills, groceries. You owe us nearly $80,000. I let out a short laugh, but not because it was funny. It was a sad, tired kind of laugh. "You're giving me a bill? Calling me ungrateful just for existing?" My voice shook, but I looked straight at her. "You stole $100,000 from me. And now you're saying I owe you something?" Her face turned red. "We invested in your future," she began to shout. "In the one with more potential." That was it. I couldn't hold back anymore. "Don't you dare," I said, my voice louder now. "Don't you dare say I wasn't worth investing in from the start. All I ever needed was a family that believed in me. Just once." I looked her dead in the eyes. "Your so-called investment stole my future." Then I reached into my bag and slowly pulled out my father's letter. I unfolded it carefully and held it up. "When you lied about this," I said, "was that part of your investment too?" I turned to face Helen. "You used my rent money to pay for your education. Did you ever stop to think about what I gave up? About all the sacrifices I made while you chased your dreams? Or were you too busy looking down on me the whole time?" The room went silent. Ice cold, still. In that moment, I saw both of them clearly. My stepmother always needing to be in control. Helen, with her smug attitude, acting like she was better than me. Everything was out in the open now. "I'm leaving," I said, taking a deep breath. I calmly said, "I've already signed a lease, and I've enrolled in night classes for the next semester." My stepmother's voice rose sharply. "You can't do that." I stayed steady and answered, "I can. Dad believed in me."
"Fine then," she snapped. "Go.
But don't think for a second that you'll ever be welcome back." I looked at them both without saying anything. Inside, something settled, something strong and sure. I quietly replied, "That's fine. I don't want anything to do with you anymore either." Then I turned and walked across Aunt Megan's wooden floor. Each step echoed behind me. With every step, I let go of everything I once thought I needed and moved toward a new beginning. Moving day came with freezing rain. I used what I had saved from working at the diner to take out cash before my stepmother froze my bank account. But since she had reported my car as stolen, I had to leave it behind. In my new studio apartment, I stood in the middle of the empty room, looking at the few boxes I had brought with me. It felt like I had lost everything, but I also felt proud. I had taken the first real step toward freedom. Then my phone buzzed. A message from Helen. "Mom's in the hospital. She had a panic attack from all the stress. I hope you're happy." I deleted the message without replying, but my hands were shaking. As I opened a box with kitchen supplies, a heavy feeling started to grow in my chest. The diner had cut everyone's hours, and my first tuition payment was due in 3 weeks. The small walls of the apartment felt like they were closing in on me. I could barely breathe. Then there was a sudden knock on the door. I flinched. When I opened it, Helen was standing there. She looked older than usual, tired. "Mom's sick," she said without even saying hello. Then, in a low voice, she added, "We might lose the house." She told me the bank had pushed them into a second mortgage. And now, Helen would have to drop out of her master's program. Her words shocked me, and I had to hold the doorframe to steady myself. "That's not my fault," I said without thinking. Helen didn't respond. Instead, she pulled out her phone and showed me a photo of our stepmother lying in a hospital bed. "Dad would be ashamed of you for doing this to Mom," she said. Her words hit me like a punch. "Don't you dare use Dad against me," I shouted. "Dad wanted us to stay together. You're the one who broke everything," I said, my voice cracking. I forced the words out. "You stole my future." Helen shook her head, looking at me with fake sadness. "Mom gave your future to someone who could use it better," she said. "You know we were right." The moment those words left her mouth, I slammed the door in her face. But her voice stayed in my head, repeating over and over. The apartment suddenly felt smaller, like a cage. Rain tapped against the window, reminding me of everything I had lost. My savings wouldn't even cover next month's rent. The course catalog for my night classes sat on the kitchen counter, almost mocking me. At 1:30 a.m., the microwave clock blinked in the dark. My phone lit up again. Helen had posted a photo of our stepmother in the hospital on social media. The caption read, "Some people choose revenge over family. Please pray for Mom." The comments poured in. Relatives, family friends, all blaming me. Words like cold, cruel, and shocked by her behavior kept showing up. Even my cousin Madison, who was always kind, had written, "How could you do this?" I curled up on my bare mattress, holding my father's letter close to my chest. Was I wrong? Maybe they were right. Maybe I was selfish. Maybe I didn't deserve more than the future they had chosen for me. As the rain hit the window harder, doubt filled my mind. I started to wonder why I ever believed I could break free. Exactly 1 month after I left home, I got a certified letter. It had the official letterhead of Gabriel Associates law firm. At first, I didn't want to open it. I thought it might be another trick from my stepmother to pull me back. But when I read it, I was shocked. "Dear Ms. Gabriel, as the trustee of Janice Dickinson's estate, it is my duty to deliver this letter now that we've confirmed you live independently." My hands shook as I kept reading. There was another account my father had left behind, completely separate from the college fund. It included property, investments, and stocks. It was more than enough to support me and allow me to build a life of my own. My father had planned everything so I could be free, so I could live on my own terms. Less than 3 hours later, there was a knock at the door. It was my stepmother. "I heard about the inheritance," she said, pushing past me into the apartment. Helen followed close behind. Together, they stood in front of me, like they always did, like a wall. "What is all this?" Helen asked, her voice smug. "The lawyer called us first," my stepmother added coldly. "It wasn't just to inform us. It was a warning." Then she looked at me with a glare. "Considering how you've been acting, I'm filing to become your legal guardian. You're clearly not in the right state of mind to handle that kind of money." When I heard those words, the room felt like it was spinning. "You have no right to do that," I shouted. "I have every right and I plan to," my stepmother said, pulling out a folder. Inside were papers, notes about my so-called unstable behavior, statements from family members, and even old medical records. She shoved the folder toward me. I flipped through the pages. Everything had been carefully chosen to make me look weak or unfit. "You've been planning this ever since you found out about the first letter," I said. "We're trying to protect you," she said calmly. But in that moment, I finally understood the truth. To her, protecting me meant dragging me back into a life where I worked myself to exhaustion to support Helen's dreams while letting my own fade away. She had never believed in me. She had never even asked what I wanted. It was now clear she would never stop trying to control me. I held my father's letter tightly in my hands and stood firm. "If you don't leave, I'll call the police," I said. "And I'll show these papers to a real lawyer to prove you're trying to take control of my life again." Her face twisted with anger, but she turned toward the door. As they left, Helen turned and said one last thing. You'll regret this, Rachel. I didn't answer. Instead, I thought of my dad, of the way he planned everything so I could be free, and how he believed in me. For the first time in my life, I had said no. And meant it. 1 year later, I was sitting in the university library. Textbooks surrounded me, and quiet voices filled the room as students studied for finals. My phone buzzed with a message from Aunt Megan. Check the letter. I was cleaning out your dad's old desk and found one he never finished. It was written just days before he passed. It stops mid-sentence. But next to it was his favorite book, Jane Eyre. He always said he wanted to pass it down to you. If you want it, it's yours. That evening, Megan gave me the book. As I flipped through the worn pages, a small envelope slipped out. Inside was a photo I'd never seen before, my dad, much younger, smiling and holding a key to what looked like his first apartment. On the back of the photo, he had written, "Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose yourself. Now it's your turn." I held the photo close and smiled. I thought about Helen. She had dropped out of her master's program the week before and started working as a waitress. She had sent me one short text. I understand now. I didn't reply, but I knew what she meant. They had sold the family house and moved into a small, old apartment. The kitchen and living room were part of the same space. My stepmother now worked part-time at a small local grocery store. She now worked as a cashier. It was her first job in 21 years, a big change from the proud, polished woman she used to be. Their lives had changed completely, and both of them were now facing the results of the choices they had made. I could see how different things had become for them, and in a small way I felt relief. Maybe now they understood. Maybe they had learned something. With the help of the lawyer my father had once trusted, I was able to take back the inheritance my stepmother had taken. I also got a restraining order, so she couldn't contact me anymore. As I traced the words in my father's letter with my finger, a thought came to me. My stepmother always believed that if I struggled, I would break, and that when I broke, she could shape me into the person she wanted. But that didn't happen. Instead, I found my own way. My grades from the first semester proved my father had been right to believe in me. In this new chapter of my life, I had found people who liked and respected me for who I really was. The book club I started at the local coffee shop had grown into more than a small group. We had become close friends. They didn't care about what I could give them, they cared about me. Next month, we'd be reading Jane Eyre, a book I suggested. And I had something else to look forward to. My phone buzzed again. It was a message from Helen. "Can we talk?" Just a few words, but I could feel her emotion behind them. I looked at the photo of my father one more time. His proud smile gave me strength and peace. I had learned something important. Revenge isn't about hurting others. It's about saving yourself. It's about stopping the habit of living someone else's story and starting to write your own. So I replied, "Friday at 1 p.m. U.S. Street Coffee Shop." Maybe Helen was ready to start her own story. Maybe she wasn't. But either way, it didn't matter. I had the key to my own life now. I had a smile I was finally proud of. And I had a new chapter to write. I tucked my father's photo into the pages of Jane Eyre and headed home to study. The future was waiting. And this time, it was fully mine.